The bold and the beautiful. A tragedy unfolds. The sun had barely risen over Los Angeles when the news broke Taylor Hayes was dead. The woman who had weathered decades of heartbreak, loss, and love in the fierce crosswinds of the Forrester-Logan War was gone. Not in some grand exit or heroic sacrifice, but in silence, a quiet death in a quiet apartment after a night of too much wine and too many sleeping pills. But her final hours would soon ignite a firestorm that would consume everyone she'd ever loved. It began with Ridge Forrester, as it always did. The man at the center of two empires, two women, and two impossible choices. After months of rekindled passion and promises, he had stood on the edge of a new beginning with Taylor. The wedding was planned, the family rallied, and Taylor, hopeful, fragile, and desperate to believe, waited for him at the altar. But Rich never walked down that aisle. Hours before the ceremony, he vanished. He left nothing behind but silence. No explanation. No goodbye. Taylor waited. At first confused, then panicked, then shattered. Her children tried to reach Ridge. So did her friends. But as the minutes turned to hours, the truth began to set in. He wasn't coming. He had changed his mind. Again, Brooke hadn't intervened. There was no dramatic interruption, no confrontation. Just Ridge's absence, a gaping hole where his vows were supposed to be. By nightfall, Taylor was alone. No phone calls. No visitors. Just the echo of her humiliation and the weight of every abandonment she had endured. She opened a bottle of wine. Then another. And somewhere in those blurry, heartbroken hours, she reached for her prescription. Sleeping pills. She didn't intend to die, or maybe she did. No one will ever know for sure. But when Steffi came to check on her the next morning, the apartment was cold, still, and quiet. Too quiet. Taylor was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead at 9:13 a.m. The shock hit like a bomb. Ridge was unreachable for hours. He had gone off the grid after walking away from the wedding, needing space, time, something. He returned to find his daughter pale and shaking, his son silent with grief, and Brooke staring at him like he was a stranger. The woman he had once called the love of his life was gone, and he had been the last one to hurt her. The guilt was instant, crushing, irreversible. The Forrester estate became a war zone. Eric and Donna tried to keep the family grounded, but the Logan name was now synonymous with betrayal in the eyes of the Forresters. Steffi lashed out immediately. Her grief turned to fury. To her, it didn't matter that Brooke hadn't schemed this time. It didn't matter that Ridge had made his own decision. Brooke was always the wedge, the siren, the chaos. Her presence alone had kept Taylor in that spiral. Steffi made no secret of her blame. Thomas, once on the edge of recovery, spiraled. His mother had been his anchor, his reason for trying to be better. He locked himself away, refusing food, refusing to speak. Only Douglas could reach him, but even that bond began to strain. The boy didn't understand why everyone was so angry, why Grandma Taylor wasn't coming back, and why Grandpa Ridge looked like a ghost. And Ridge was unrecognizable. He stopped showing up to Forrester Creations. He didn't shave. He didn't sleep. He played the last voicemail Taylor had left him on repeat, a message filled with hope and trembling vulnerability. She had said she couldn't wait to be his wife, that she knew this time would be different, that she believed him. He hadn't even responded. The media caught wind quickly. Tragedy at the altar. Renowned psychiatrist dies after wedding scandal. Headlines spun the story into a circus, and Brooke became the scapegoat. She couldn't go out in public without cameras in her face, questions, judgment. She swore she hadn't interfered, not this time. But no one cared. The narrative had already taken shape. Then came the police. At first, it was a standard death review. Alcohol and prescription medication, a tragic, but not uncommon combination. But Dr. Lee Finnegan, reviewing Taylor's charts as part of the hospital's oversight, noticed something off. Taylor had been prescribed a new dosage of her sleeping medication recently, but the records were sloppy. Some inconsistencies. The quantity remaining in the bottle didn't align with the expected use. And there were other signs, odd fluctuations in her vitals during her last visit weeks earlier, bruising that didn't match the fall she had reported. And most of all, a text message Taylor had sent to Lee asking to review her medical records. But that Lee had never seen until now. Lee flagged it. And suddenly, Taylor's death wasn't so simple. The LAPD quietly opened a deeper inquiry. An autopsy was ordered, but the family wasn't told the full reason. Not yet. Ridge, caught in his grief, didn't question it. But Steffi began to sense something. She confronted Lee, who hesitated at first but finally admitted what she had seen. Taylor might not have died from a simple overdose. There could have been manipulation, interference, maybe even intent. This changed everything. Steffi's suspicion turned to rage. Who would want to hurt her mother? Who had access? Who would benefit? Her eyes turned to Brooke. Again. It was irrational, and deep down she knew it. But logic had no place in this house anymore. She confronted Brooke in public in front of reporters, paparazzi, and family. Accusations flew. Brooke denied everything, heartbroken and exhausted. She reminded everyone she hadn't even spoken to Taylor that week, let alone seen her. But Steffi didn't care. She wanted someone to pay. Rich tried to stop the spiral, but he had lost all moral authority. His indecision had destroyed a woman. Whether Taylor had taken her life or someone had helped her along the way, Ridge's actions had been the catalyst. He knew it. He saw it every time he looked at his children. Every time he heard her name. Eric called for a ceasefire, but it was too late. Hope tried to protect her mother. Finn tried to pull Steffi back from the edge. Liam hovered at the periphery, torn between support and self-preservation. Even Katie and Carter were drawn into the chaos, trying to mediate, to soothe, to stabilize. But the family was splintering, and no one knew how to stop it. As the investigation deepened, new evidence emerged. Security footage from Taylor's apartment building revealed an unexpected visitor the night before she died, a figure in a hoodie, face obscured. Time-stamped just hours before Steffi arrived to find her. The keycard used matched someone from the Forrester inner circle. Police weren't releasing names yet, but they were closing in. And that's when the anonymous envelope arrived at the LAPD precinct. A printed photo. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. It showed Taylor, unconscious on her couch, and someone standing over her, holding a glass. The war was no longer just emotional. It was criminal. Everyone had secrets. Everyone had motive. And somewhere in the wreckage, the truth was waiting, ugly, buried, and ready to explode. But one thing was clear. Taylor Hayes may have died alone, but her death would not be quiet. In the days following Taylor Hayes' death, grief had not yet settled into silence. It remained raw, volatile, and clawing at the edges of sanity for those she left behind. The Forrester household was thick with tension, a brittle atmosphere that could shatter at any provocation. But none felt the weight heavier than Thomas. Isolated in his mother's old office, he combed through her belongings, desperate for something anything might offer closure, clarity, or peace. He found none of those. What he found instead was a letter. Not a suicide note. Not a goodbye. But a handwritten message meant for him and Steffi Taylor never got to send. The letter was tucked inside a leather-bound journal, dated just 2 days before the aborted wedding. The handwriting was unmistakably careful, emotional. Taylor had written to her children with love, reassurance, and even hope. She spoke of the future, of healing, of starting fresh. No matter what happens with Ridge, she had written, "You both are the greatest loves of my life. I am strong because I have you. I want you to know I will always fight for that strength, for our family." The words were steady, deliberate, not those of a woman unraveling or on the edge of collapse. Not a single line hinted at despair. Thomas sat frozen, rereading the letter again and again, heart pounding, his mind rejecting the narrative the world had already accepted, that Taylor had broken under the weight of heartbreak. But this letter contradicted that entirely. This wasn't the voice of a woman giving up. This was the voice of someone holding on. Which begged the question, what really happened that night? He took the letter straight to Steffi. She read it with trembling hands, jaw clenched, blinking back tears. The words were their mother's, and yet they no longer made sense in the context of her death. If Taylor hadn't planned to take her life, then what had caused it? And who had been with her that night? Later that evening, at the Forrester estate, the siblings brought the letter to Ridge. He read it in silence, face darkening, every word cutting deeper than the last. Brooke was in the room, silent, unreadable. And that's when Eric, seated nearby, suddenly spoke. I may be losing parts of my memory, he said slowly, but I do remember something from that night. I saw Taylor in the parking lot. She wasn't alone. The room went still. Eric looked around. There was someone following her. A woman. Blonde. Wearing a trench coat, his eyes narrowed, struggling to recall every detail. I assumed maybe it was someone from the press. But now, I'm not sure. The implications landed like a grenade. Steffi's head snapped toward Brooke. Thomas's eyes narrowed. Brooke looked stunned, but said nothing. Ridge looked like the floor had just disappeared beneath him. Eric shook his head. I didn't think much of it at the time. But it wasn't a paparazzi. She wasn't holding a camera. Just watching Taylor. Within hours, Ridge had demanded that Forrester Creations building security pull the parking lot footage from that night. Normally, such a request would go through legal channels. But this was personal. They found the footage, grainy but intact, and played it in a locked room with only Ridge, Thomas, Steffi, and Eric present. The timestamp matched the night Taylor died, approximately 8:42 p.m. The camera angle showed Taylor walking toward her car, alone, head low, coat wrapped tight around her frame. And then barely visible in the far corner of the frame a figure appeared. A woman, blonde, slim build, standing at the edge of the parking garage, unmoving, watching. The camera didn't capture her face. She was just outside the full focus range. But the profile, the hair, the posture, it was familiar. Too familiar. It looked like Brooke. The air in the room turned cold. Thomas stood up abruptly. What the hell is this? Eric shook his head. It could be anyone. Steffi's voice cracked. No. Look at the way she's standing. That's Brooke. She was there. Why? Ridge stared at the screen, silent, his expression unreadable. Brooke hadn't mentioned being near Taylor that night. In fact, she had claimed she hadn't seen Taylor in days. And yet, here was this footage, her possible presence mere hours before Taylor's death. The timeline no longer added up. The story no longer held. Thomas's anger ignited. She followed her. She waited until Taylor was at her lowest. And then something happened. We've been calling this a tragedy. But what if it wasn't? What if it was staged to look like a suicide? No one dared say it out loud, but the thought was already screaming through the room. Was Taylor murdered? Ridge finally stood. We go to the police, but the police had already been digging. Dr. Lee Finnegan had not let go of her suspicions about Taylor's toxicology reports. The inconsistencies in medication dosage, the irregular blood work, the unseen text from Taylor requesting her medical file of it pointed toward foul play or at the very least, manipulation. When Ridge handed over the security footage, investigators began to reconsider everything. Detective Baker reopened the file, this time with full resources. A new forensic sweep of Taylor's apartment was ordered. The autopsy was expanded to include tests for rare sedatives that might not have been flagged in the initial toxicology. The letter Thomas had found was submitted as evidence. Then came a second bombshell. The footage from the lobby entrance, previously dismissed due to poor resolution, was digitally enhanced. The woman in the parking lot had entered the building earlier that evening, captured briefly on lobby surveillance. She had used a visitor pass issued earlier that week unregistered to someone close to the Forresters, someone with no alibi, someone who had reason to be there, and someone with deep connections to both Ridge and Taylor. Not Brooke. Donna Logan. The revelation sent shockwaves. Donna, Eric's partner, had said she was at home that evening, but visitor logs didn't lie. She had accessed Taylor's building, and the photo anonymously sent to the police days earlier, one showing Taylor unconscious with someone holding a glass now carried deeper weight. A frame-by-frame analysis revealed a ring on the hand holding the glass, a ring identical to one Donna had worn in public just a week prior. Donna was called in for questioning. She denied everything. She claimed she had gone to Taylor's to warn her about Brooke, about Ridge, about the emotional cliff she was standing on. I was only there to talk, she insisted. She was already drinking when I arrived. I didn't stay long. She asked me to leave, but the timing didn't work. She had stayed nearly 30 minutes, according to building logs, and the surveillance suggested she wasn't alone when she exited. A second figure appeared, obscured, wearing a hat someone else who had been in Taylor's apartment that night. Was Donna covering for someone? Or was she the one orchestrating something darker? The Logan sisters closed ranks. Brooke defended Donna fiercely, publicly, drawing more suspicion. Katie, usually the moral compass, remained uncharacteristically silent. The media exploded again. Rumors of foul play, of staged suicide, of family betrayal. Brooke found herself once more under siege. This time, it wasn't just scandal. It was potential criminal implication. Eric was devastated. Could the woman he trusted be involved in something so sinister? He had seen too many betrayals in his lifetime, but this was unforgivable. He began questioning everything, every interaction, every word, every moment since Taylor's death. Meanwhile, Thomas grew darker, obsessed. He stopped going to work. He stopped sleeping. He pored over every detail of that night, convinced now that his mother had been manipulated into death. Whether Donna had poisoned her, or pushed her, or simply watched her suffer, Thomas didn't care. Someone had to pay. He began tracking Donna's movements, hiring a private investigator, collecting evidence the police hadn't touched yet. He didn't trust the system. He only trusted his rage. Ridge, caught between his son's fury, his father's heartbreak, and his own spiraling guilt, no longer knew what was real. All he knew was that he had destroyed Taylor emotionally, but someone else may have taken her life. And the truth had only begun to unravel. Because as police followed the digital trail, new names emerged: assistants who lied about their whereabouts, phone pings in strange places, delivery logs that didn't match records. Taylor's death was no longer a closed chapter. It was the beginning of a storm. And when the truth finally came to light, who entered that apartment last, who left first, and what really happened in those missing 40 minutes, it would change the Forresters forever. Taylor may have been the victim, but someone among them was a killer.